because whenever we have wanted to do a HAS update for the economy, we have always been able to rely and to call upon the skilled and talented people at Lakeshore Advantage. And just a bit of background, because I'm going to let our presenter talk about Lakeshore Advantage. But it is a nonprofit economic development organization. And it was founded in 2003 in a collaboration between community and business leaders. And its purpose is to, to assist companies in finding resources and connecting resources throughout Ottawa and Allegan County, so that we all live in a vibrant economy. And so with us this morning is Mandy Cooper. Mandy is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Lakeshore Advantage and has been since 2018. Prior to that, she was a consultant for Cooperage Company and assisted with their marketing and branding and fundraising. She has also served as the Director of Advancement for Zeeland Christian Schools, and she has her bachelor's in communications from Calvin College. So please join me in welcoming Mandy Cooper.
Thank you, Connie. I am so happy to be here today. Before I get too far, I do want to also reference my colleague Katie DeGroff, who's sitting next to me. So if you see my turn my head at all, it's because maybe Katie has flagged me and reminded me something I missed or I needed to say. So appreciate Katie's being here to assist me as well. I am going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll go through the presentation. As Kim said, if you have questions as we make progress through the content, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I will do my best to answer them as we go, but I also will provide time at the end for discussion so that we can dig into any of the topics that are of greater interest to you. So with that said, let's jump right on in. Economic focus on the community, reaching our 10-year target. So as Connie said, Lakeshore Advantage has been around since 2003. We work solely with Allegan and Ottawa counties and the employers in those counties. We are a nonprofit and are led by a 20-member board of directors, mostly from the private sector, so business leaders, but also we have some public sector representation as well. We have the administrators from both Ottawa and Allegan County on our board serving, as well as some of our education partners. Our annual budget is typically around $1.6 million, and that did shift a little bit this past year during COVID, and I'll get into why that was in a little while, but typically that's about where we fall. As we said, 2003 is when we got our start, and for those of you who've been in the area for several years, you may remember what happened. Lifesavers unexpectedly announced they were moving to Canada. And with that move, they were taking hundreds of jobs. The driving impetus really was related to sugar pricing, believe it or not. But the bottom line was we didn't see that coming as a community. And so our business leaders realized the importance of proactive economic development and really investing in the primary business base before we get to a crisis point so that we can ensure great job opportunities for our current and future generations. As far as how we do that, there are 3 core focuses that I'm going to talk through. And there's a couple reasons why I'm going to talk through these. One of which is because we are always looking to our community to help refer people to our organization. Economic development can sometimes be a bit of a vague term to people who haven't had much experience with actual economic development functions. And so we try to demystify that a bit because we are here to help. And to do that, we need to make connections. So we'll be looking to this group as well as you're in conversations in your community to let us know if there's somebody we should be connecting with. The first core focus area is maintaining a robust primary business base at all stages of development. So when we talk about primary business base, we're really talking about primary employers. And these are employers that do more business outside of our region than they do inside of the region. The reason that's important is because it means they're bringing wealth into our communities. And then our service and commercial businesses, retailers, restaurants, et cetera, they help keep that wealth in our community. But again, from our Lakeshore Advantage perspective, we really focus on those primary employers. These would include food processors, manufacturers, agriculture companies, technology companies, for example. And these are companies that really, they could locate anywhere because they do business outside of our area. They don't have to be here, but they've chosen to be. And so it's important that we continue to ensure this is a good place for them to do business. Manufacturing, as I mentioned, is really the sector we work with the most here in our region. 1 in 3 jobs are in manufacturing, and these jobs tend to pay about 35% more. So again, when we talk about long-term economic health and vitality, these are the types of jobs that will help ensure that. Manufacturing share of Ottawa County gross regional product has increased more than 50% over the last 10 years. So 90 minutes is a long time for one person to talk, so I'm going to try really hard not to do that. We'll do a little bit of interactiveness here. And since this is a class, I thought I'd do a pop quiz. Grab a pencil if you want to keep track, or if you'd like to show off and show Kim how much you know, feel free to throw your answer into the chat. I can't see it, so I won't judge your answers. I have about 10 questions here about our local employers, and we'll see if you can identify who we're talking about. And the reason we like to do this is because this is part of our job, is getting to know our local employers and helping to tell their stories. So these are stories we've discovered over the past years. So first one, this company was named Disney's Supplier of the Year in 2018 for their design and build for theme park rides. Who am I? I'll give you just a moment. I'm not going to spend too long, so don't think too hard. This employer is JR Automation Technologies. They have a facility in Utah, actually. So they're based here in Michigan, but they are all over the world, and their Utah facility created those automation functions and features for the rides. This company is responsible for the blue light safety phones on college campuses, including Hope, I believe. They've been making safety communication devices for over 30 years. This one's answer is in the name, Code Blue. Sorry, I went too fast there. This company is the only auto supplier to build complete vehicles. Who am I? This is an example of something I learned when I started at Lakeshore Advantage. I was not aware of this. And that is Magna. This is the world's largest supplier of over-the-counter self-care products for the store brand market. More than 2,200 people take their products every second, every day. Who am I? I'm curious how people are doing. I'll ask at the end. This is Perigo in Allegan County. This company built the railing that is used for the presidential inauguration every year. The government used to order a new one every 4 years until this company built them one that can be packed away and stored. Our neighbors up the street, Zealand Architectural Components. This company is known for creating the office cubicle. Who am I? Herman Miller. They are known for the cubicle. This company powder coats all of Planet Fitness's purple and yellow fitness machines. Technicoat Quality Powder Coating. We're getting close to the end here. This company is the 5th largest dairy co-op in the United States. And that's Continental Dairy to the north. This is one of only 64 colleges and universities recognized for providing outstanding undergraduate research, creative project opportunities, and counted among universities like Yale, Stanford, MIT, Princeton, and Northwestern. I'm assuming you're all going to get this one right. Hope College, fantastic education partner for economic development. In 1974, and this is the last one, this company introduced the world's first dual cell photoelectric smoke alarm. They quickly became the commercial industry benchmark for fire protection. And that's Gentex Corporation. So I'm curious how you did. Kim, feel free to chime in if you saw anybody that was getting them all correct along the way. I'd be impressed.
A winner from what I can see on my end has to be George Bowrichter, who's on this class and is the founder of Sound Off Signal. So yes, congratulations,
That
George.
makes sense to me.
I'm
Excellent.
disappointed I missed one.
You missed, which one did you miss?
Zealand Architectural.
That's a hidden gem.
Yeah.
That's impressive though. I'm impressed.
Well, I know about them because they were involved in making Eames wooden stools back years and eons ago in another whole lifetime of mine.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Well, congratulations. We'll have a round 2 later, but
we could have asked who makes most of the police, fire, and ambulance lighting and sirens in the United States. Nobody would have guessed that, but
Sound
me.
Off Signal.
That's right.
Excellent. Well, and you know, and again, the reason we do that is because we really do focus on primary employers and manufacturers. And so we get to know them, and B, to tell their stories of innovation. Our manufacturers are incredible, our educators, the training programs in our area, we have a rich community with which we can do business in. So thank you for that. That was fun. I'm going to keep moving because the third one is the one we're kind of heading towards. So the second core focus area is tackling economic challenges and opportunities. And I'll give you just 3 examples of how we do that. Everything we do at Lakeshore Advantage, well, we try to make sure everything we do at Lakeshore Advantage is really based on primary research and data, so data-driven solutions. So one of the functions we fulfill is we survey our business community every year. We go out to 120 employers and talk with their executive level management, CEOs, COOs, and we go through a fairly intensive survey process where we ask them questions about their business and how they're doing. When we're done, we aggregate all of those survey results and create our business intelligence report, which, as I'm showing on screen, you can find on our website. If you haven't seen the 2020 report, I highly recommend checking it out. It's under the business intelligence report under regional info on our website. The insights and data that comes out of those reports really helps us understand the challenges and opportunities our employers are facing and is our ongoing kind of pulse check on our business community. So it's something that we work on almost every day here. You know, 120 interviews with our companies takes a fair amount of time. They're all personal one-on-one interviews. And again, we aggregate all that data so that we have a better vision of what's happening. The second way we help tackle economic challenges is by working with our primary employers on expansion and growth opportunities. So this was kind of our snapshot of where we are right now as well at the end of our second quarter. We have 41 projects in the pipeline. And so a project is an expansion or a new build, anything that's increasing the square footage that includes private investment of some sort. And as you can see in our pipeline right now, we have $735 million in potential new investment into our community. And that's really good news. Now, not all of those projects will come to fruition this year. There's a lot of things that, you know, make or break a project, an expansion project, but including financing. And so that's one of the ways we can help. We help companies find resources, whether that's through tax abatements or maybe they're expanding in a brownfield area where they can get some support funding there for cleanup, et cetera. But the goal obviously is to help our companies succeed and to create new jobs and retain the ones we have. The third way we really assist our community from an economic standpoint is by responding to crisis. As I mentioned, Lifesavers was really the impetus for starting Lakeshore Advantage. But this past year, as we all well know, we saw another crisis that nobody saw. Well, that's not true entirely, is it? It took us by surprise. And so we had to quickly, like everybody else, adapt and pivot and frankly, increase our assistance to our local community. This included actually expanding our services to reach out to small businesses beyond our primary employers because of the impact that the pandemic was having on their ability to stay healthy and to be here in the long term. So there were a lot of things we did. One of the biggest and easiest to quantify is our work with small business relief grants, so COVID relief grants. We did 3 rounds of these grants, awarding almost $5.5 million to our small businesses here in Allegan and Ottawa counties. And that was done in about a 9-month time period. So that was new for us and a huge challenge, but it was really incredible how the community really rallied and assisted us. We worked with our chamber partners, we worked with business leaders and community leaders who helped us review the applications, et cetera. So overall, a good experience working within this community, which is no surprise, but to deliver some much needed relief. And then finally, we look forward to ensure long-term economic health. So the question is, how do you do that, right? So what things need to be in place to ensure that Allegan and Ottawa counties are stable economically speaking? Here's how we do it. Our strategy for ensuring long-term economic health requires focusing on really 3 pieces. First, we work OneYear Goals that create and build up to a 3-year picture. So when we set our OneYear Goals, we're looking and trying to envision what do we believe our economy should look like in 3 years. That vision is set because we know what our 10-year target is. So we have a 10-year target, 3-year pictures, OneYear Goals. Well, the reality is we kind of have to work that process backwards, right, in order to figure out what those pieces are. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through how we set our 10-year target for 2030. The old Yogi Berra saying, if you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else. And I think we've all probably experienced that. So as I said, really, we need to start with where we want to finish in 2030. As far as selecting that target, what is our goal for 2030? That process really began in earnest for Lakeshore Advantage back in 2017. There's a website, it's wmdashboard.org, which tracks economic indicators for West Michigan as a region. We are part of the Region 4 Prosperity Region, West Michigan. And so we reviewed those economic indicators. They're all pretty standard indicators that economists look at. Some examples on that dashboard that you can look at are things like high school graduation rate, labor force participation rate. A high labor force participation rate shows like there's a good balance between labor supply and demand from employers, and income from self-employed workers, which is an indicator of entrepreneurs and risk takers. So those are some examples. We worked with our investors and our board of directors to say, okay, 33 indicators is too much. We can't work towards 33 indicators. We really need to focus. And so we selected 4 key metrics to focus on. Employment growth, average income, median income, and the number of people 25 years old with a bachelor's degree. And we selected these for very specific reasons. Total employment growth is really a standard economic indicator. It's tied to funding at the state and federal level. So how many jobs do we have, and is that number growing? Average income indicates the type of lifestyle that is available here and helps us with talent attraction. Median income tells us how our companies are paying, and again, it's tied to that talent attraction piece. And then the bachelor's degree, obviously educational attainment is closely tied to economic health, both short-term and long-term. And we decided to look at the bachelor's degree for a variety of reasons. The other option would have been to look at associate's degrees. At the time that we started this process, there was less reliable information on an associate's degree and certificate completion across the country that was comparable. And again, as I said, we really are driven by data. So making sure we can compare apples to apples was going to be important. So we selected bachelor's degree. Obviously, selecting the metrics that we are going to measure is important, but it's also important to say, well, okay, what is our goal and how are we setting those numbers? We did that by looking at 4 comparative communities across the country. So you can see them on the screen: Indianapolis, Nashville, Cleveland, Greenville. Each of these communities have attributes that are similar to our Lakeshore community. For example, Cleveland has a high manufacturing concentration. Greenville looks a lot like us on paper. There's a lot of out-of-state investment and high manufacturing concentration, as well as a similar population size. And so once we selected those communities, we could say, okay, now we know where to measure our targets, what we're going to measure against. So again, median family income and average wage, educational attainment, and total employment growth. And our goal is that when we look at our comparative communities, that we are at or above their numbers across the board, except for one, which is educational attainment. And I'll talk about that in just a second. As you can see, we've listed, and these are by region. So that's why you see counties listed here, not cities of themselves. As the good news is the median household income and average annual pay are both on track. So you can see over a 10-year period, we've had strong increase on our median household income. When we look at our comparative communities, we're doing really well. Same for annual pay, actually. And again, these are as of 2018 numbers, but when we set our targets, we were on track there as well. Oops, I'm sorry, just went too far. Okay, now we caught back up. As I said, educational attainment is the one where we are going to look outside of our comparative communities. And that's simply because if you look at the national average of bachelor's degree attainment, that's at 32.6%. None of our comparative communities hit the national average. And so when we look at what do we want to aspire to, we want to be better. So we're at minimum, we want to be at or above the national average for bachelor's degree attainment. And again, that's saying that 32.6% of adults in the nation hold a bachelor's degree. In Ottawa County, 34.8%, so we're doing well there. Allegan County, 23.3%. And so that's one where we say we're off track. We need to do something. We need to make a change in order to impact that number. Employment growth, again, something we're watching. You can see there's a pretty wide variety here as far as our comparative communities go of where they are. We know that employment growth right now is being limited by talent. That's the #1 barrier to growth we hear from our local companies. And that's nothing new. We heard that pre-pandemic, and you've probably heard that as well. In the short term, the other big thing right now is supply chain issues. So getting things like resin and the microchips, those types of materials, components are slowing our companies down. But we need to look past what's happening right now, as we said, and look out to 2030. So what are we going to do? What are the changes we're going to make to really move the needle on those metrics? To figure that out, we worked with the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research and really asked them to dig deeper into our current and future economic reality. The results of this study, which is about 100 pages long, and you can find a summary of it on our website, but the results of this really became the guide map for us as we look to achieving our 2030 economic indicator goals. So one quote I will share, and you can read it or listen as I read it. Overall, the goals of increasing median household income, average annual pay, and the percent of the population with a bachelor's degree or higher, and in total employment growth are highly intertwined. Economic theory suggests better educated and trained populations earn more based on a higher value of their marginal product of their labor. As the collective human capital rises in a region, the region becomes more competitive and its workforce should yield higher earnings. So again, when we look at household income, when we look at when we look at annual wage, median income, educational attainment, and employment growth, the things that we do to impact one of those factors also impacts the others. And so when we try to figure out, okay, which levers do we need to press, which buttons do we need to push in order to start to make a difference, there are 4 challenges and opportunities that we identified that we are going to try to tackle over the next 10 years. So first, access and affordability to higher education. Second, attractive community for emerging workers. Third, access to broadband. And fourth, diverse industry and population. And I will touch on each of those briefly, and we'll delve into one of those a little bit deeper in a few moments here. So as far as affordable higher education, currently about 60% of our high school students enroll in college after high school here in Ottawa County. In Allegan County, that number is around 50%. However, and I have to say, I don't have the most recent numbers for actual degree completion out of that 60 and 50%, but it drops drastically when you look at actual degree completion 6 years later. So that's how we get to, we currently are closer to 32 to 34% in Ottawa County as far as those that hold bachelor's degrees, and then 23% in Allegan County. Additionally, our workforce and the skills needed to stay employed and to stay suitably employed are increasing and changing. They're more technical in nature. Those entry-level jobs that do not require education or post-secondary education, I should say, are really disappearing fast at our primary employers. So this higher education, again, whether that's a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, or certificate, becomes even more important. So again, just looking, we always look back to see how are we doing against our peers. Ottawa County, again, in and of itself is doing fairly well compared to our peers, just a little bit better than the national average right now. But Allegan County definitely trailing behind at 23%. The other issue we talk about is access to broadband. Obviously, we know after the pandemic how connected this issue is to health in everything from learning and education to physical health, accessing healthcare, and ability to work. Obviously, we know there's large discrepancies in our communities about who has access and who does not. And that was really highlighted throughout the past 18 months. Watching our schools try to get service to our kids was pretty tough. And they did an excellent job with what the resources they had available, but we need a longer lasting, more secure solution. When we talk about an attractive community for emerging workers, we're talking about workers who are younger, 25 to 34. There's several reasons for this. Obviously, they're going to be here longer and contribute to our labor force for a longer period of time. They also, right now, emerging workers who move into our communities tend to have higher levels of degree attainment. So again, this interconnected piece. So the people moving into our community, the percent of them who move in are actually more educated. So that's a good thing. But they do also tend to be older. So we are attracting more post-prime age workers, 55 years and older, than we are emerging workers. So, you've probably heard Ottawa County is is actually the fastest growing county in the state of Michigan right now. Between 2010 and 2020, I think the number was just under 12% of growth in Ottawa County. So that's great news, but still trending older. So we really need to figure out how do we continue to make this a community that's attractive to our younger workers in addition to our 55-plus-year-old population. One of the ways we can do that is by focusing on the fourth piece, which is diverse industry and population. So Upjohn identified the lack of a business cluster. While we have a lot of manufacturing, oftentimes economic developers will like to be able to show that we have, for example, maybe we're the dairy capital of the world, or we're the tech capital, that sort of thing. We have a lot of manufacturing, but we hadn't been able to really tell a strong story about how this area can attract additional employers to it, what we have that's special as far as the specific industry sector goes. We've actually made a lot of progress on this. This is as much part of the storytelling as it is supporting the employers. And that is really recognizing that our manufacturers, and even outside of manufacturing, but especially in manufacturing, are really at the front edge of implementing what's called Industry 4.0 technologies. So these are advanced manufacturing technologies that combine things like automation and big data and analytics, which result in more efficiencies, cost savings for the manufacturers and the customers. So that's something, and I'll talk just a little bit about that more in a few minutes, but we are making some progress on. But then also, as far as what our population is made up of, we are less racially and ethnically diverse than the state of Michigan. And we know that emerging workers who are so vital to our long-term health really do prefer areas with diversity of peoples, entertainment options, housing options, lifestyles, et cetera. So that is a challenge as we move forward. As I mentioned, the Smart Manufacturing Initiative, that's the Industry 4.0 thing I was talking about. But it also, as we went through this process, highlighted why we have strategic partnerships with groups like the Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance and the Ottawa County Diversity Office. This is not just a community issue, this is a business issue. And so we need to amplify their work and make sure we're bringing them to the business table in these conversations as well. So again, big picture, as we look at 2030, these are the 4 big hurdles we see that if we overcome these 4 things, if we make progress, significant progress over the next 10 years, we're going to be a more secure, healthier environment for business. We're going to be better economically and stable. So we're going to pause there because I've been talking a lot again. Let me stop and just ask if there's any questions so far. I know that was a lot, trying to kind of show you how we build our plan for economic health, but I'm happy to dive into anything of interest. All right, hearing no takers, I'm assuming you guys are ready for another quiz. So, Mr. Boerichter, are you ready? I'm looking at you right now. All right, here we go. Again, similar number of companies. This is just a little breather, and let's see how we do. So this company just had a new expansion that will be entirely devoted to 3D printing and additive manufacturing. This is Woodward here in Zealand. They do a lot in the aeronautics and defense industry. This company is known for being a leader in the revolution of craft brewing and distilling. Their products are now sold across the globe. Who am I? I see smiles. Proud Hope alums who started New Holland Brewing. We talked about them earlier before some of you joined the call. So such a success story, exactly the type of businesses we want to support. They started here. They were born, actually, I'm not sure physically where they were. I remember when they were located by the train tracks, but they started small, expanded, became distributors, and now their reach is national. They are also leaders in the brewing industry. This company has used the same premium recipe for more than 90 years, making them one of the oldest and few premium ice cream makers left. If I could see your chats, I would ask you to tell me what your favorite is. Mine is strawberry cheesecake, just side note, if you ever wanted to take me out for ice cream, that's what I like, but Hudsonville, of course. Hudsonville did 4 expansions last year, and they show no signs of slowing at all. They're doing extremely well, and they're a great local employer. This is the largest employer in West Michigan and was rated one of the top 10 health systems in the US. Spectrum Health. So healthcare is not always considered a primary employer, but they provide such important services to our primary employers and we know that physical health is so closely tied to economic health that we really do partner with our healthcare providers quite closely. And they're a great investor and partner in our work at Lakeshore Advantage. This company is Michigan's largest soybean processor, producing 11 million pounds of soybeans a year. And that is Zealand Farm Services. This company is the only single source global manufacturer in their industry. Hayworth. This company is responsible for supplying Jimmy John's with their cold cut meat. Tyson. This company has the largest indoor ropes course in Michigan, which I am sad to say I still have not been to. It's the Allegan Event Center. So if you get there, I'd love to hear what your experience is. Now that the pandemic is easing, I'm looking forward to taking my daughter and some friends one of these days. This company produces 400 different frozen custom entrees, side dishes, appetizers, sauces, and desserts. And that's Request Foods. In 2020, this company helped to create or retain 652 jobs, leveraged $22.3 million in business support funds, and supported projects that led to $152 million in private investment back into the community. All together now, Lakeshore Advantage. I think we have one or two more here. This is one of the largest privately owned companies in America. They're actually headquartered in Walker, Michigan. Meyer. Landscape Forms, a world-renowned outdoor furniture design company, partnered with this company to design the wall panels and seating design on Pier 26 in New York City. So this is a company that partnered with Landscape Forms. And that is Disher. So we are in the same building as Disher. Disher, another great entrepreneurial success story. Over 100 employees, multiple locations now. They do a lot of product development and consulting. Okay, I think this is the last one. All 5 members of this research institute's first board of scientific advisors were esteemed scientists who were or became Nobel laureates. And that is Van Andel Institute, which not based right here in Ottawa County. When we look at our research and again, the medical support in this area, we definitely include our relationship with Van Andel Institute. So how did we do this time? Any better? I saw a thumbs up from Connie. That's good. We'll take it. All right.
Mandy, I do have a question. I don't know if you want to do it now or later. From Norma, is whether or not you can comment on losses, if any, in terms of loss of jobs and employers that occurred during COVID or since COVID.
So we are right in the process of doing this past year's, we're in the process of surveying from 2021, right? So we go throughout the calendar year now. We changed that a couple of years ago. Because we survey primary employers, I'll stop sharing so you can see a minute here. Those results are really limited to like the manufacturers, et cetera. And that data, it's looking good. We haven't seen huge losses from an employment standpoint. There have been some, here and there, specific industries that got hit a little bit harder, or now who have slowed down a bit. That chip shortage I mentioned has impacted our automotive companies because that product has become less available. But overall, manufacturing has done really well in this community. So that's the positive, right? Being in manufacturing ended up being a steadying force for our economy here in West Michigan. Obviously, small businesses took a hit. I don't have numbers as far as how many businesses we lost. I attended a statewide small business forum a couple of weeks ago, and I can't recall the numbers they shared, but they even have trouble tracking like how many have closed and opened. And it's that open part that was interesting in that they're seeing a lot of entrepreneurial activity. So while there have definitely been job losses, and you can look at unemployment numbers for an idea, there's also really positive signs, and this you'll see this often when the economy changes, that people took steps forward in making their ideas become a reality. Maybe they opened that business that they were looking to start, or they left a company when they were put on furlough for a while. But those are good signs, and we like to see that entrepreneurial activity. So it's kind of a clunky, big answer. But again, from the employers we work with, we aren't seeing substantial job loss at all overall. All right, I will go back to sharing my screen here a second. All right, so again, I'm talking about how do we set a 2030 target and how do we get there? We get there by working the plan. So the plan is built on one-year goals that feed into our three-year picture, ultimately heading towards those 10-year target numbers that we talked about. So our first three-year picture will come due at the end of 2023. And I won't spend a lot of time on most of these, but just to give you an idea of the types of things we're watching. So as I mentioned, Industry 4.0, that is a biggie for our manufacturers. So our goal by 2024 is that this area, the Lakeshore in particular, is known and recognized as an Industry 4.0 leader. We also want to experience significant strides forward in affordability and accessibility of higher ed. Broadband becomes more accessible. We celebrate new business and talent attraction partnerships. Our startup community is buzzing with robust programming, access to capital, and growing companies are receiving national recognition. At the same time, Lakeshore Advantage is supporting efforts to overcome challenges like housing, childcare, transportation, career awareness and readiness, and emerging diverse workforce. So one of the things we have to do as an organization, and most of you can relate to this in one way or another, I'm sure, is there's so many opportunities out there, so many ways to make an impact. You have to focus and choose. And so we try to identify where are we leading, where are we engaging, being part of the process, and where are we supporting. And we try to support in those areas that we know feed into our economic health, but that we may not be the best person or best organization to lead the way. So a great example is housing. There's an organization, Housing Next, that was actually born out of Lakeshore Advantage, and we partner closely with that organization and let them lead the way in addressing the housing challenges in our area. So just because we aren't spending more time in one of these isn't because that they're not important, but because we identified another organization better suited to lead. And then as far as what does that action really look like? This is our one-year goals. These are our strategic initiatives for the year. These are the things we are currently working on. So we are developing an Industry 4.0 roadmap to success. This includes a $92,000 grant that we received from the state of Michigan in April. And we are leading a regional partnership that is, sorry, you're gonna hear the train going by. I'm in the Colonial Clock Building here in Zeeland, so this is one of the joys. As long as you can hear me, we'll just keep moving. As I said, we're leading a regional partnership that is surveying our manufacturers to figure out how ready they are and how far along they are in Industry 4.0 implementation. So an example of this would be, there are technology, we've had robots since the 80s. So it's not just about, automation. It's connecting the robot to knowledge and processing of that knowledge. So for example, You can have robots that weed gardens now, and they can sense where there's a weed, pick it out, identify what it is, and then tell the manufacturer how to adjust the fertilizer so that there are less of those weeds, right? It's combining all the data points for better efficiency, which again reduces costs, and in an environment where talent is such a challenge, can push down on the need for more people, and instead just needing more skilled people, which again leads to better pay and better jobs. So that's the Industry 4.0 piece of it. The community college millage model, I'm going to talk about that a little more detail in just a minute. So I'm going to just fly by that one, but I'm coming back to it. Third, we're working with both Ottawa and Allegan County now on their digital broadband action plans. There is a survey out that I'll show you in just a second that I'm going to encourage all of you to take if you live in Ottawa County. We're working and always working to secure additional dollars to support business and talent programs. And we have a very robust entrepreneurial community in our area and are working on the launch of an incubator. So we're hoping to make some progress on that and have some updates on that later this year. And then finally, we are contracted to work with the Holland Smart Zone, which is an entrepreneurial area in downtown Holland and a little bit north that encourages tech startups and supports their work. So, as I said, one of the annual goals was community college millage model developed and shared. So the reason that this is a goal is because of that. And again, everything ties back to those target numbers we talked about, educational attainment. How do we move the needle on educational attainment? As you all know, community colleges are around the state. This graphic shows where exactly they are in the state of Michigan to the right. The Grand Rapids, they're in the kind of the peach, that's obviously Grand Rapids Community College in Kent County. Ottawa County and Allegan County are not part of a community college district. So that means we don't pay taxes that go directly towards one of the community colleges. As you can see, a lot of the counties do. We are by far the largest population wise that does not have a community college attached to the district. So again, we do not pay what is called in-district tuition because we do not pay taxes. Instead, we pay out-of-district tuition rates. The bottom line is that makes college almost twice as expensive for students who attend community college who live in Ottawa and Allegan counties. So these are related to Grand Rapids Community College in particular. Again, the in-district credit hour, $117 versus the out-of-district. And when you look at what that could be annually, we're looking at almost $4,000 versus almost $8,000. So it's twice as expensive for our kids to go to school if they want to go to community college. And when I talk about Industry 4.0 and, the manufacturing jobs that are becoming available and how they're changing, they really do all require post-secondary education. And a lot of that can come through our community colleges. While we have identified the bachelor's degree as kind of the ultimate benchmark that we can compare to the other communities, we do know that increased community college and associate's degree attainment can feed into that as well. And so one of the strategies for moving the education needle was to look into whether or not it makes sense to vote on a millage to have Ottawa County join the Grand Rapids Community College in district area. So as I said, 57.2% have little or no college experience, which is also an equity issue. So lower wages, lower skills, there's long-term ramifications for that. So as we started talking about that, we engaged with a group of leaders that included people from the West Coast Chamber, our Lakeshore Advantage team, and Model Communities, which is a group of community leaders, and put together an exploratory committee to really dig into, well, if we think being part of a community college district is going to help with educational attainment, what's the likelihood that we could actually get that passed? Because it would require a vote. And the way things are set up in the state of Michigan at this time, To be annexed into a community college, you have to do it either by entire intermediate school district or by individual school district. And so the committee looked at 3 specific districts in our area: Holland Public, West Ottawa, and Zeeland Public. And if the millage would pass, that would mean anybody living in the Holland Public School District would qualify for in-district tuition at Grand Rapids Community College. If it passed in West Ottawa, if you lived in the West Ottawa School District, you would qualify for in-district tuition. If you went to Hamilton, you would not. If you were in the Hamilton School District, then you would not, unless it was on the ballot in the Hamilton School District. So we launched a survey, an EPIC MRA poll, to find out the likelihood of being able to pass a millage like that. And I know this is little, and I mean, you can take a peek at it, but the bottom line that came back really was really good chance of passing a millage in the Holland Public School District, fair chance of passing it in West Ottawa, and it was probably going to be an uphill battle in the Zeeland Public Schools. And again, that's based on answers to a pretty robust survey polling. This is standard polling that is done, the EPIC MRA polls. And so even with not being sure of Zeeland Public, if we could move that needle, that group was still interested in moving forward, saying, hey, if there's a chance, we feel like there's some momentum here, let's continue down this road and shoot for a November 2020 millage vote on this. They began kind of putting together talking points, such as what you can see on the screen, and also extended their conversations to key community leaders to again, just exploring, would you support something like this? Do you see this as a need? Do you, here's the data we have. Do you believe this will impact educational attainment? And ultimately, would you help us with this millage campaign? Would you serve in your community on a community action team, et cetera? This went from January through about April. We were kind of hot and heavy in these conversations, really, really pushing towards the November millage. And then the date came where we were going to have to file. So you have to officially say, yes, we're going to be on the ballot. There's fees that get involved. The GRCC board needs to vote, et cetera. And there were a couple curveballs that the group really just felt were impactful enough that we needed to pause. So as you may know, Holland Public School, West Ottawa, and Zeeland all turned over their superintendents this year. So we have new superintendents coming in for next year who have not been part of this conversation and process, right? So there was that piece of it. Because of the pandemic, the district themselves, so we think of school boards and administrations, were really tied up with COVID-related issues and trying to navigate those. And frankly, their capacity for taking on another big push was just really, really slim. And then finally, all the conversation nationally and in the state politically about free community college began to complicate the discussion. So while we were talking about being annexed into GRCC so that our students could have in-district tuition, we weren't talking about free community college, but there's a lot of people who are. And we found that it was starting to clutter up the conversation and putting a political bent to something that we weren't attaching to politics in any way, shape, or form. We feel in-district tuition is an apolitical measure that can be taken to help a community. And we have a lot of data to show what can happen when you do have in-district tuition. But all that said, I started at the beginning talking about we are a data-driven organization. We do look at the information we have available and we pivot when we need to. So continuing to march ahead despite some of these warning signs would be folly. We believed. And so instead of really pushing towards that November millage, we have pulled back a bit. And that group that was leading the way, so West Coast Chamber, Lakeshore Advantage, Model Communities, they're going to take a step back and really have some more deeper conversations with the community again. And try to even back up a bit to say, okay, if we're not moving forward with a community college millage this year, is that still the best way to impact educational attainment long-term? Or should we consider something else? And if it is, then we'll get the superintendents, school districts on board, have those conversations, make sure we're all together, and then we'll move it forward in 2022 or beyond. So, when we were talking about what was I going to talk about when I came to speak with this group, we were still pushing pretty hard on that millage and really hopeful that we'd be able to move forward. But as I said, this is part of economic development. It's reading what's happening, it's adjusting as the environment changes, and this environment changed over the past year. So we'll definitely look forward to your feedback and interaction on that issue. I'm curious what your thoughts and questions are, even with just this little bit of information. And if that does move forward, there'll be many opportunities to get involved if that's something you're passionate about or interested in. The last piece I want to give an update on is this digital broadband plan. And again, the main reason I want to dig into that, I'm not going to go into broadband too deep. My eyes glaze over and I'm involved in it when I start talking about it. But, as I said, we know that there's an accessibility issue there. Our counties are working hard to try to address it. And the good news is that because of the pandemic, there are now financial resources available to help them address it. And so we're working with them as they kind of go through their own individual processes. Allegan and Ottawa's processes are slightly different. Ottawa County is already to the point where they've begun doing a user survey. So this is a survey where they're asking households in Ottawa County to go online, answer some questions about their experience with the internet in their home. So again, without going too deeply, our internet service providers provide information on what they say is available. That's not always the experience of the people who live in those communities for a variety of reasons. And so the county is trying to get a handle on who actually has access to the internet and what does that look like? What speeds are they getting? And where do we need to invest time and look at implementing additional solutions? So to take that survey, you can go to michiganmoonshot.org/Ottawa. That survey is going to run for the next month or so with the hope that it'll start directing the county later in the fall with plans for how to overcome, those gaps that they find. So they're working with an organization called Merit, who created something called the Michigan Moonshot and is working with a lot of communities across the state. So that's one of their tech partners in that process. And then the last slide I have, and then I'm just going to answer questions or allow you guys to talk amongst yourselves, whatever you prefer, is if this is something, if economic development is of interest for you and you have a desire to be involved or stay up to speed, there's a couple of suggestions I have. First, if you go to our website, lakeshoreadvantage.com, we do send out a newsletter on a regular basis. And this is just a great way to kind of stay in the loop on which companies are growing, any trends. When we release our annual report related to those business intelligence interviews I talked about, we put that in our newsletter. So you can sign up for that. As I said, I really, really encourage anyone who lives in Ottawa County to please take that broadband survey. You take it from your home. So to make sure that your home internet is the one that's included in this survey. And then third, as you come into contact, whether it's with the companies you've worked for in the past or started, make sure to refer them to us. Again, our goal is to help our primary employers succeed. I've given you several ways that we do that. There's a lot of other ways we can come alongside employers as well. So when an employer bumps into something that is stopping them from being successful, send them our way. And if we can't help them, we can often refer them to somebody who can. So we really do depend on that word of mouth referrals to help our companies. Definitely keep learning. I love this group. I've interacted with HASP before. I was on the Tulip Time board, and HASP, so many of the HASP members are the tour guides and do training and just have always been impressed with this group. But also encourage your kids and grandkids and your kids and grandkids and neighbor kids who are maybe they don't think school is for them to keep learning, even if it's not an official bachelor's degree program. We just can't stress enough, post-secondary education is so important. And then finally, be an advocate for a region. invite people to move back here. We have a place for them. We have a need for them. As I said, talent is the #1 challenge facing our employers right now. So anything you can do to get the people in your lives to stay here and move here, that is certainly helpful. And that is what I have for an official presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. That was so good, Mandy. I learned so much. I do have a couple of comments. One is just before I forget, since we've been talking about community college, the importance of that, we do have a presentation this week on Thursday morning by Dr. Bill Pink, who is the president of Grand Rapids Community College. So if you all are interested in hearing more about that, I encourage you to come to that virtual class on Thursday morning at 9:30. And then it looks like I have something in the chat. The question is from Dave. How is Lakeshore Development, excuse me, involved in the need for housing in Ottawa County?
Good question. So I think I probably touched on that a little bit. Housing, as we all know, is an issue. It's an issue nationally, and it's been an issue here in Ottawa County in West Michigan for several years now. A group called Housing Next, led by Ryan Kilpatrick, actually started from within Lakeshore Advantage and kind of was spun off into its own organization with its own funding model. And they do a lot of research on the housing market. So what are the needs related to rentals, to home ownership? The truth is there's a housing need at almost every single price point. Often there's a misconception that all we need is more affordable housing, meaning low income housing to some people. It's actually not true. We need more $1 million homes. We need more $500,000 homes. We need more $250,000 and definitely $100,000 homes, as well as rental options. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of conversation at the local unit of government level. Obviously, Holland has been in a robust conversation about moving the needle even just a little bit with some of the UDO discussions that they've had. But again, you know, our role there is to support Ryan's work and help him connect as needed. So that's one where we don't in our day-to-day get too involved other than to make connections and share the need and information.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
This was a terrific presentation. I didn't know very much about Lakeshore Advantage, and I learned a lot and really impressed with the thoroughness of your planning and being a data-driven organization. Having said that, I wanted to raise another issue. I was really surprised that in all of our planning looking 10 years out, we're not addressing the issue of climate change. As I read, that's a major issue for industry in general. In Holland, we have so many industries that supply the automobile industry. So you have GM and Ford announcing that they're going to require all of their suppliers to be carbon neutral in the next 10 years. Local industries like Steelcase and Kraft Heinz are already signed up to become carbon neutral in the next 10 years. Consumers made a surprise announcement. They're closing down the Campbell plant. You want to attract young and diverse employees. These are people, they're concerned about climate change. So surely somewhere in our economic development plan, there is some concern. Am I completely wrong in saying making green energy available is going to be an important way to attract industry and keep industry?
Not at all. You're absolutely 100% correct. And, you know, so I showed you kind of a really high level, the final, here's the 4 things we're focusing on. You're definitely correct that the climate change, the green living, placemaking related to that, in particular, things like, you know, everything from bike paths to encouraging sustainable companies to companies that are working in energy, such as Volta Energy, LG. I was going to say Chem, it's LG Energy now, right? Looking at more sustainable ways of powering our products. Those are all parts of what is going to keep our economy healthy. They aren't the ones we've identified as our key focus areas, you know, in the way that I laid out. But no, I agree with you 100%. One of the, frankly, debates we have a lot in economic development is the line between economic development and community development. Our cities, our towns, our communities are responsible for their downtowns, for making it walkable, for making it livable. We know those are things that attract emerging workers, right? Like you said, having the opportunity to ride a bike to work is attractive. You look at communities like Madison, Wisconsin, that have robust bike paths, and those are good things. We have not put our focus on Lakeshore Advantage driving them because we really do believe the communities are in the best position for those pieces of it. But one of the conversations we are having is when we look at growth and when we look at which companies are expanding, we as the economic development organizations serving the community are asked to weigh in when incentives come along, when the state is deciding which expansions do we support. We are asked, is this good for the community? Is this something you want to see? And so, we are having discussions about what types of jobs do we want to encourage, because we don't have enough talent to go around. We really don't. And so when we're looking at companies expanding, which are the ones that are worth investing in? And from a completely pragmatic standpoint, you're absolutely right. The companies that are investing in sustainability, that are investing in solutions for sustainability, that makes good economic sense, period, right? Those are going to be, we believe, the stronger companies long term. So again, while not noted as one of our major strategic initiatives, definitely part of the conversation. I think there's always an opportunity to push on those ideas, though, and say maybe they should be at the top. Maybe we need to define those more clearly in, our value proposition for the area. And that would require some work, right? From a regional standpoint to get there, to say this is a place that really values sustainability and green living. So I think it's a really good point. Yeah, interested if you have more thoughts about that.
Yeah, just one follow-up thought or question. There are people who want to create what I consider to be a false controversy between cheap electricity and clean electricity, right? And their argument is based on attracting industry. So I think, it would be helpful to know from people who have experience in this, how to respond to that question. Because first of all, clean energy is inexpensive, although you do have to spend some money to start it up. But secondly, is a 5% increase in electric rates to support a decarbonized electricity, is that a good investment or a bad investment? Is that going to attract industry or scare industry? But surely you're having some contact with places like consumers and HBPW and others in terms of their role in economic development. What are you telling them?
Yeah, I mean, so I need to be careful not to go too far because I'm not an expert in as far as, the energy industry goes. We absolutely do work with consumers closely. And, we're supportive of what they're doing long-term with their Campbell plant, right? I mean, it's the right direction. There are questions always of timing and making sure there's good plans in place to support the transition, right? That plant closing is going to have an impact over the next 10 years on two particular communities. Port Sheldon, it's a huge income base for Port Sheldon, and then the Grand Haven Public Schools are going to get hit with the loss of that tax revenue. It doesn't mean it's not the right decision long term, and we agree with that entirely. And so, our job really is to come along and, we partner with the energy companies and try to support them as they do that and make sure our communities are able to make the transition as best as possible. Again, back to the data piece from an economic development standpoint, when you look at what the car manufacturers are doing and what they're investing in, I mean, that tells the suppliers where they're going to need to be, right? If they want to keep up with where the car manufacturers, the automotive companies are going. It's not just a signal. I mean, there's strong requirements for if you want to participate this in the future, it's changing. So, there's that piece of it too. Again, I want to be careful. I'm not an energy or automotive expert as far as trends, but we do know that those big leaders, the energy companies, the automotive manufacturers, they set the tone. They absolutely do. And again, it comes dollars and cents. If you want to be a supplier, you have to supply what they're doing, right? So provide them with what they need. So
Thank you. I'm not
good
trying to put you-
conversation though. It's fascinating. I mean, it's
I'm
a
not
great,
trying to put you on the spot. No.
no, it's good. Yes.
In response to what was just discussed, it's important to look at the structure of the industry and commerce in Western Michigan. And essentially, with the absence over the last 25 years of the gray iron foundries in Muskegon and Grand Haven and Holland, a little longer ago in Holland, there are essentially no heavy industry use manufacturers in Western Michigan because we are not really a primary manufacturing base location. So we're not processing aluminum or glass or steel or any of those things. We have no plants, no industries that work in that regard. The closest we get is if you go to Midland and you do some chemical processing. And because of that, energy is a relatively insignificant cost to all the people who operate in Western Michigan. Hayworth isn't going to move a plant because electricity goes up or down. Neither is Steelcase or Gentex. It takes a relatively modest amount of electricity compared to a steel plant to air condition and manage the moisture content, humidify or dehumidify an electronics plant, which is essentially Gentex. It's nothing but a big electronics plant. I know because we won that. That's a couple 100,000 square feet, and then electricity is an irrelevant cost to us. That doesn't mean we wouldn't want it cheaper, because businesses by definition always want it cheaper in the short term, but it is not really a deciding issue. That is a critical issue in some places. So in some respects, to focus on the energy cost issues and the climate issues here is kind of a red herring, because it just because of what we do, and particularly because our presence next to the lake, it gets really, really difficult to make a justification case for taking a nice couple 100,000 square foot flat top building and putting solar panels on it if you live in West Michigan. We just don't get that much sunshine to make it work. It's much better off to have that 200,000 square feet on the other side of the lake in Wisconsin and pump the electricity over here than it is to put it on this side of the lake. So I don't think that the Lakeshore Advantage would get very far effectively producing a positive result for the community by focusing on electrical cost. And it's not that we shouldn't be supportive of clean energy. We have to be supportive of clean energy. And that is where all the auto parts people are all going. They're all moving in the direction of electrifying not only their cars, but also taking every single component that's in a car and reducing the electrical input into it. And then if you make a part that goes in a car and runs that uses electricity, reducing the amount of electricity it takes to do that. You can probably run a whole car on what today on the headlight consumption if you have a 20-year-old car. But we still want to make it smaller because it takes then less energy to be shoved into that battery to make it go another mile or two further. So it's a worthwhile focus, but it's not going to be a big payoff locally for industries to spend their focus on reducing energy cost, or even very much reducing energy usage, because energy usage is easiest to cut when you have a lot of waste of it. And we just don't have those kind of manufacturers around here.
Well, and I mean, that is a good point. I will say, when we do our business intelligence interviews, more often we ask about energy consumption, we ask about water consumption, all of those things. And more often than not, we're being told electrical consumption has gone down because of improvements they're making to their facilities, right? So I do agree with that entirely. I think the piece where we see it most relevant is in that emerging worker. How do you attract and keep employees, and what matters to them? And so that, again, that community placemaking, being a green, sustainable community, that becomes important to attracting emerging workers, as does sustainability from a corporate sense, because they do care about what their employers are doing. But your point is completely right on. We are not processing raw materials at high levels here in West Michigan that require ginormous amounts of electricity. It's very true. Water becomes a bigger issue, frankly, from a utility perspective, because of the food processing, and agriculture requires so much water and wastewater. So that's a really good point. Any other questions? Yeah.
I appreciate your focus on the larger multi-regional, even multinational companies and their growth and their need for skilled workers and things. But as you drive around town, there's help wanted signs everywhere. Now, yes, many of them are for unskilled, but we're still short of labor of that nature. I mean, what's the answer, or how do you approach that at all? Is it just increase wages, or, how do you view that?
It's a complicated question. And frankly, one of the conversations we're having amongst our staff is, are we answering the right question? Like, how do I find more people? How do I get more talent? The reality is, if, from a population standpoint, population is going to be decreasing in the next 20 years, right? Birth rates are going down. It's a global phenomenon. It's a national phenomenon, and it's going to be a local one too, short of people migrating into our area at higher rates. And so we don't anticipate the talent issue to go away anytime in the near future. So, frankly, one of the strategies we talk about with our companies is retain, train. Every employee is valuable. Every employee has potential to be a long-term employee. That's the best, absolute best thing you can do, is be a place where they want to work, where they're being paid fair, good wages. Your question about we raise wages? Yes, I think there has been some room as we've looked at where we've been the last few years. We've seen that happen though. I meet with a group of HR professionals every quarter from some of our local companies, various sizes, small, medium, and large. We have Herman Miller at the table, as well as for sure like a JR Automation, but also like Transmatic and Disher. So, and as we talk to them, their entry-level wages, and this is a bit anecdotal because we don't have our complete surveying done, but their entry-level wages are about $2 higher this year than they were last year. And again, that don't hold me completely to that because we don't have the official surveying done, but that's what we're hearing. Everybody has had to raise wages in order to get people in the door. But the universal need for talent, we believe, is going to be here to stay for a while. So that's why, things like Industry 4.0, so automation is important. It is going to relieve, some of those unskilled positions. That's really where we're having a lot of trouble finding people, are in some of those entry-level positions, but also in the higher skills, again, so employers who invest in their employees and help train them and show them a path for how do they get to that job that pays $20, $24 an hour, right? How do they go from, frankly, the companies I met with, nobody was paying under $14. So in the past, nobody was paying under 12. Now we're hearing entry level really are 14 to 17 kind of. So, but that can only, your point, about wages, you can only push wages so far. And, employers, especially, I'm talking primary employers. Now you look at small businesses, that's a whole nother conversation. They can't keep up with that either. So retain, train. And attract, right? I mean, so that's the emerging worker piece too. We do want to continue to attract people to our region, for sure.
Thank you.
Did you get the question from me, Connie? I had a phone call, you might have answered it. It was, does Lakeshore Advantage have business fairs that would introduce people in the community to all of the businesses in the area and also showcase employment opportunities?
No, we do not have anything quite that comprehensive. We do highlight our entrepreneurial network from time to time. We just had our Surge celebration. Again, if you sign up for the newsletter, you'd get notified of those. We also partner with the schools for Discover Manufacturing Week every fall. And so that's where they really open up the companies to students in particular, but some also invite parents and community members. But no, we don't do like a business showcase quite that robustly in that way.
Okay. And then the next question that just came in was, what do West Michigan companies do, if anything, to make it easy for married couples to move here? For example, if they want to hire the man, do they help the woman or the wife or vice versa find employment?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And a lot of communities handle this differently. You're starting to see a lot of incentive programs, right, for people to move different places. There's a website, fascinating. If you ever want to like go down a rabbit hole just of entertainment, go to makememove.com and you can see all the incentives that different communities are offering. But we work with an organization called Hello West Michigan, which is out of Grand Rapids. That's where they're based, but they serve the entire West Michigan region. And anybody looking to return to the area, to move to the area, whether as the primary provider or a spouse coming with somebody who already has a position, strongly encourage them to reach out to Hello West Michigan. They will take resumes. They will try to help make connections with local companies, really do a great job with that. So that's where I would go for that.
And then I just saw one more, you may have answered this while I was on the phone, but to comment regarding Lakeshore Advantage, what they do to support tech companies or to attract young skilled professionals to that area as well as other skills.
So we, as I said, we have a pretty robust startup environment here on the Lakeshore. We have so our entrepreneurial startup network is branded Surge, we call it. And we do have programming that supports entrepreneurs and tech companies that are just getting started. As far as like tech companies themselves, a lot of them are located in our Smart Zone in downtown Holland, and there's special financial resources that come along with that and support. But again, we also partner with Tech Talent, which is an industry council for West Michigan. We find talent really to be a big regional issue. Definitely communities themselves can make themselves attractive. But really when people are looking to come to an area, they're looking at an area, and it doesn't always stop at the county line. So we work on that at a regional perspective there. Sorry, I got distracted as I was answering. I see Mr. Bullrichter has his hand up.
I think we do not appreciate enough, and business hasn't done enough to recognize that with COVID, the almost total disruption of the child care network, and not just the formal structure of the various daycare centers and things like that, but the informal networks for childcare, the disruption of that, and it has caused a considerable extended unemployment. We know in our business, for instance, we laid off 0 people. Well, fact is, we've never actually had a layoff in 30 years, but we laid off 0 people, but we had people who simply couldn't come to work because they couldn't risk the child care with grandma who was taking care of them, and then The vaccines have come along and that have helped a lot, but there are still people who the patterns they had to take care of their kids haven't been reestablished. And until those are reestablished, there's a significant number of people where either the husband or the wife, depending on what they did, has decided that they have to be teacher. And that went on during the school year, but it hasn't really gotten any better as we have got into summer, because we don't live in a society anymore where most people are comfortable letting their 8-year-old be home alone all summer long by themselves, or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old for that matter. And so if we don't have the ongoing structures to support that in childcare, those people aren't available to enter the workforce. And we probably are reaching a point in our society where it is going to be difficult for really unskilled people to make enough money by themselves to have the expenses totally of living, particularly if they're caring for someone else, a spouse that's not well, an aged parent, or a child on one lower modest income. It's not that that income hasn't gone up. Certainly our wages have gone up more than $2 an hour for everybody. But there's going to be a lot of people on the lower skill level where you're going to have 2 people working, but one of those people can't be then engaged in childcare. There has to be a place that's good and competent and inexpensive. So we really need to move in our society, whether we like it or not, and whether we think there's a D in front of our name or a D after our name or an R, of having preschool that essentially runs all year long for 3 and 4-year-olds and up, so that it's at least available for anybody who wants it, and is essentially a societal cost. And until we get there, we're not going to get a lot of people. We have people who aren't going to come back in the workforce. And that may not affect one place, but it's surely going to affect another. And it's going to have a greater effect on somebody whose business model requires a higher degree of low skilled or semi-skilled or repetitive manual labor. It's going to have a much greater effect on Request Foods than it is on Disher Design. Disher Design can probably function without there being daycare for their employees' kids. Request Foods can't. And on the other hand, not everyone who comes into our community can get a job at Disher Design, and not everyone is going to be able to go to work in the advanced manufacturing facility that Gentex or Sound Off wants. It just isn't going to work that way. And so, yeah, we're short of people, and it's going to stay that way. We're going to be short of people because we have some people who simply can't enter the workforce until the child support issue is taken care of. At least that's what I think.
No, and I think everything we've seen from a data standpoint confirms that for sure. You're absolutely right. It's, when you look at the number of women who've dropped out of the workforce, the labor participation rate for women, which off the top of my head, I'm not going to come up with, but it has, women fell out of the workforce far greater than men. Men have mostly returned to the workforce, again, at a very high level. We're talking, generally speaking. And, there has been some regional research done into why that is. West Michigan Works did a talent study actually with Calvin University and Talent 2025 into why aren't people getting back to work, and childcare was right up there. And so, you know, we have our COO is on the Ready for School board. They applied for a pilot program in the state of Michigan to do, it's called ThreeYear. It includes cooperation with employers, a child care lead in the community, and the state. And unfortunately, our community didn't get the pilot, only a few did. But again, that's one of those areas where Lakeshore Advantage goes, here, you're absolutely right. And we support efforts to address that. Without a doubt, even though we can't, that's not probably our lane to lead the way in. But again, you know, with everything we work on, that interconnectedness, these issues go across their community issues, their business issues, right? Their economic issues. So the best part about, I believe, working in along the Lakeshore here in West Michigan is the spirit of collaboration and, you know, the willingness of our private business leaders to get engaged in these community challenges, frankly. So I have hope. I do have hope because of that.
I would just throw in as a parent, I don't know how many House members would think of this, but when I was in high school, and my husband and all of our friends, we all had summer jobs. We all worked at the local stores or the grocery stores or businesses. And now we're finding that if our kids want to play sports, there's a lot of pressure for them to be involved in travel teams and to go to workouts and sports camps all summer long to be able to even make those teams in the academic year. And that makes it very hard for them to find an employer who's willing to work around a crazy schedule like that and invest in training someone who, you know, it's going to be here one week and gone the next. So I feel like that's why we're not seeing more of our youth taking some of those frontline, even temporary jobs. That and transportation. I know for having kids at Holland Public Schools, I know that transportation is a big issue for a lot of our kids. And even just getting a driver's license now to take driver's ed is over $500 just to take driver's ed. And that's a significant cost to a lot of families to get their kid driver's education. So those are other barriers that I think we're not addressing hard enough yet. I'm not sure what to do about it, but I just know it's definitely, that pressure is definitely out there.
Well, and I think your point too is valid in that these are complicated issues without simple solutions, right? I mean, so if you can figure out a way to work through the athletic scheduling stuff, I mean, parents everywhere, right? From the time school gets done to when school's in session, athletics plays such, I have a daughter who's in athletics, and yes, she starts beginning of August. So that's when her work kind of has to stop. I have another daughter who goes to Hope, and she can only work within how far she can get to, right? So transportation too. So yeah, here.
The only other thing I have in the chat is just a compliment saying what wonderful information this has been and how much we've learned and how experienced and bright people have shared and supplemented. An excellent presenter. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been a privilege. I very much enjoyed this.
Mandy, I just want to add, I just thank you so much for such an informative session. And beyond that, your support of HASS programming and Lakeshore Advantage, always so responsive to our requests. And I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, everybody. I hope you have a good afternoon. And again, feel free to join Thursday morning if you'd like to hear Dr. Bill Pink talk about community college. So thanks. Goodbye, all.
Bye.